Good morning, Laboratory Booking Office.
Oh, good morning. I'm interested in booking your lab in March.
Would that be the science laboratory?
Yes, that's right.
And in March, you say?
That's right.
Do you have any specific dates yet?
Yes, we do. We'd like to reserve the lab for 2 days, actually.
Okay,
But they're not consecutive days. There's a break of 3 days in between.
that shouldn't be a problem.
At the moment, we're looking at 5th of March and 9th of March.
Okay, let me just check those dates for you. The 5th is okay, but I'm afraid we already have a booking on the 9th.
I see.
We could actually do either side of the 9th, so the 8th would be possible, as would the 10th. Does that help at all?
Yes. I think it would be better to have a little more time in between the sessions, rather than a little less. So I think we'd like to go for the 10th.
Okay, that's fine. And I'm assuming you'd like to book for the full day on both days?
Yes.
And you'll be arriving at 9, will you?
Actually, we'd like to begin a little later at 10, but we'll be staying until 6.
Okay. And could you tell me what time you'd like to take breaks?
Yes, we'd like to take a 15-minute break at 11:15, a lunch break from 12:30 to 1:30, and a 30-minute break at 3:30 in the afternoon.
Okay. And sorry, the morning break is at what time?
11:15, please.
Okay. Can I just ask how many of you there will be? You know we can't have more than 12 people in the lab at any one time.
Yes, I do. Actually, we're just under the limit. There will be 11 of us.
Okay, that's fine. So would you like to go ahead with this booking?
Yes, we would.
Okay, so can I just take your name, please?
Roger Jamieson.
Is that Jameson?
Actually, it's Jamieson.
Okay, sorry. And could I also take a contact number for you, Mr. Jameson?
Of course. That's 0476376580.
0476376580.
That's right.
Okay, thanks. Just a couple more things I need to check with you. So you'd like me to send out the visitor pack to you?
I think so. Could you tell me what's inside, actually?
Of course. There's a general information section. You know, all about the lab, some background information, and the facilities available. Also, there's a section on safety, of course. There's also a map showing where we are and how you can find us. And also the prices are included in that.
I see. Well, yes, that would be very useful. But could I check a few of those items with you now?
Yes, of course.
Just regarding the price, I have a note here saying the daily charge is £120, but I think it might be out of date.
I'm afraid it is out of date. That was the daily rate about 12 months ago, but the price has gone up slightly since then. Now it's £135 a day.
I see, okay. That's still okay. And I could ask you what kind of safety equipment you provide and what we need to bring ourselves.
Yes, we provide lab coats and safety glasses, and there's no extra charge for those. They're all included in the price. Because shoe size can be a problem, and we're quite a small laboratory, we don't actually provide lab shoes. But you don't need lab shoes, actually. You all just need to wear closed-toe shoes, no sandals, of course.
I see. Okay, that's fine. And finally, I understand that there is a free bus service from the station.
That's right. It leaves every 20 minutes, and it leaves from bus stop 7A just outside the station.
7 a.m., okay. I think that's everything.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming. I know for many of you that there will be very little new about the content of this talk, but as I'm sure you all appreciate, we feel that in the interests of health and safety, we are obliged to go through the safety guidelines for using the laboratories. I would like to start by saying that of course the university would prefer not to expose you to any risk at all in the labs, or anywhere else on the campus. However, for you to become fully trained scientists, you need to be aware of the full range of laboratory techniques in use. Some of these can, if they're not conducted correctly, can be hazardous. If they are carried out following the safety practices we have in place, they should not present any safety problems. I'm going to divide the talk up into the following sections: personal safety, lab equipment, chemicals, biohazard waste, and finally cleanup. So, first on the list, personal safety. Now, you have a full list of safety measures in the handout, but I need to draw your attention to some points in particular. The first of these is footwear. You may be surprised at the number of people who try to come into the lab wearing sandals in the summer months or backless shoes. Of course, nobody does this on purpose. People forget, or they simply just want their shoes to match whatever they're wearing that day. We understand that it can be a nuisance. But not wearing sensible shoes can be extremely dangerous, so please always be careful on days when you need to go into the lab. Alternatively, you may like to invest in a pair of lab shoes. The other point I need to highlight with respect to personal safety is the need to look after yourself when you're in the lab. By this I mean it's far too easy to get engrossed in your experiment and not to notice the passing of time. You need to take regular breaks in order to stay fresh and alert. You know, it's a little like mountain climbing. The vast majority of accidents occur on the way down, and so it is in the lab. The vast majority of accidents occur late in the day when people have already spent numerous hours working. So keep an eye on the clock. Schedule regular breaks for yourself into the program. Okay, moving on to lab equipment. I'd like to highlight 2 points here. Firstly, people who keep clean and tidy benches are far less likely to be involved in accidents. So keep your bench clean and tidy at all times. Clean up any spills immediately, but also please keep the communal areas clean and tidy too. Any glassware containing chemicals that you need to leave in the communal areas under the fume hoods must be clearly labelled with your name, course code, and the contents of the container. Failing to do this is not only inconsiderate for other lab users, but can also be extremely dangerous. Secondly, this may seem like a small point to mention, but it does happen far more often than we would like. And it is the occurrence of people cutting themselves when looking for glassware in cupboards or drawers. Please do not rummage through the storage areas quickly in your eagerness to push on with your experiments. There may be sharp objects inside, of course, or the glassware can simply just break. It seems like an obvious point, but as I say, it does happen, so please take care. The next category I'd like to look at is chemicals. First of all, acids. Now, if you spill a small quantity of acid on the bench, then as most of you will know, use ammonia solution to dilute it before washing it down with water. But please note, and please highlight this on your handout if you will, that if you spill a larger quantity of acid on the bench or floor, you should first ask the technician for crude sodium bicarbonate. Then use this sodium bicarbonate to neutralize the acid before you wash it down thoroughly with plenty of water. So for larger quantities of acid, use crude sodium bicarbonate. The other substance I'd like to mention is mercury. Again, if you wouldn't mind highlighting this on your handout, mercury from broken thermometers does present a special kind of hazard. And again, as you know, the vapour from spilled mercury does present a long-term hazard, and we need to be very, very careful on how we clean this up. Now, no matter how much time you have spent in laboratories previously, we really do not want you to attempt to clean up this kind of spillage yourself. The danger is not only that you may come into contact with the mercury, which of course it goes without saying you must never do, but also that you may end up spreading the mercury rather than actually cleaning it up. So the thing to do immediately in this situation is speak to the technician. I have to just say again, please never attempt to clean up the spillage yourself. Please never feel so embarrassed about the accident that you try to sort it out yourself. Speak to the technician immediately and he or she will take control of things from there. Okay, I think that's all on mercury. Let's move on to the next category, which is biohazardous waste. Of course, all biohazardous waste needs to be disposed of correctly and it will be autoclaved by the lab technician. But please remember to place the waste in the right location. Solid waste needs to be put in the bleach bucket and liquid waste needs to be put on the tray marked waste to be autoclaved. Please do not leave waste near to the designated areas if the waste area happens to be full. This can very occasionally happen during busy periods. Again, contact the technician, they will make space, and then you can leave the waste in the correct place. Just a final word then on cleaning up at the end of your lab session. 3 things I'd like you to highlight. Please be careful to place pipettes in the appropriate waste container. Second, please leave microscopes with a low power lens in place. And finally, never, no matter how much of a hurry you may be in, never forget to wash your hands thoroughly with antiseptic soap and water before leaving the lab. Okay, many thanks for listening. If you have any questions, we can now...
Well, good morning to you. Today we're going to look at a sensor which is helping doctors to measure blood pressure inside a person's heart. So let's have a look at the sensor, or rather a blown up diagram of the sensor. As you can see from the scale indicator, it's no bigger than a grain of rice. And as you take a closer look at the components, you'll notice that there seems to be something missing. Of course, the device contains no battery.
Sorry, so are we to assume that this sensor is implanted into the patient?
That's correct. The sensor can be implanted into either the aorta or the left atrium.
Sorry, and is it a permanent implant?
Yes, it is.
So the sensor is sending out signals constantly from the patient's heart. I mean, blood pressure data.
No, it can't do that. The device is triggered when scanned. So it's implanted on a permanent basis, but it's only active, if you like, when it's scanned. Using a radio transmitter and receiver held close to the body is sufficient to activate the device and, if you will, to interrogate the implant.
Isn't implanting rather a severe measure to take to get blood pressure data?
Well, remember that this is not just blood pressure data. This is blood pressure data from inside the heart, and as always, we have to consider the alternatives. Currently, the only alternative is to insert temporarily a catheter into the heart via an artery in the arm or leg. And as we all know, this method is unpopular with patients because it is rather unpleasant, and it's not so popular with hospital administrators because it is quite costly, particularly since measurements need to be taken 3 or 4 times a year for many patients.
And isn't this costly?
Well, the initial figures look quite promising. The developers estimate that within a year the cost of production could fall by 20%, though at the moment they're not saying how that is going to be achieved. So why the need? Well, in the US alone, every year there are in excess of 500,000 new cases of congestive heart failure. So as you know, this is when fluid builds up in organs and limbs because the heart fails to pump enough blood around the body. This device is designed specifically for these people. Now, the condition is treatable at the moment only via drugs. But in order to ensure that the treatment is indeed working, doctors need to measure the blood pressure inside the heart. As I mentioned previously, this could be 3 or 4 times a year. One advantage with this device is that it only needs to be implanted once, and then measurements can be taken as often as doctors require. A further advantage is that from the trials, measurements are extremely accurate and can be taken extremely quickly.
So are there any drawbacks with this method?
Well, yes, there are. One of the problems which we find in many implanted devices is that with time they become clogged up by cells or proteins.
So what happens when this device does get clogged?
Well, because the device works mechanically by the flexing of a membrane, any build-up around the device is not such a problem. Again, the trials seem to suggest that the device can still produce accurate results even when it becomes coated.
Wow, that's impressive. And are there any other disadvantages?
Yes, there are. One further snag is that being batteryless, the device cannot monitor the heart continuously, so you only get a snapshot picture, if you like, of the blood pressure. But still, we could take these measurements more frequently than we can at the moment. There's also one other concern, a concern inherent in several implanted devices, and that is the danger that the sensor could become detached from its location. If this were to happen, there is a high risk that it could be swept away into the brain and possibly initiate a stroke.
Wow, that's a fairly serious concern.
Yes, it is. However, the research team are adamant that the device is highly unlikely to move because of an anchoring device they have developed to keep the sensor in place.
So is this something that we're going to see available to doctors soon?
I think so. The development team are being cautious about this, but they have implied that it could be on the market within a matter of months.
For centuries, people have tried to find surfaces on which to record their thoughts, stories, and messages. Almost everything imaginable has been tried: wood, stone, ceramics, cloth, bark, metal, silk, bamboo, and tree leaves. Today's lecture, ladies and gentlemen, is a short history of papermaking. As you probably know, the word paper is derived from the word papyrus, which was a plant found in Egypt along the River Nile. The Egyptians produced sheets of papyrus on which they drew images and stories. However, it took some 3,000 years before any major advancements were made. In fact, it wasn't until AD 105 that many claim papermaking was finally invented. There are historical records which report that in the year papermaking was shown to the Chinese emperor by Cai Lun, who was an official of the imperial court. But if we look at the most recent archaeological findings, there is evidence to suggest that the invention of papermaking came some 200 years earlier. There are also some findings of ancient paper pieces which date back to the period of Emperor Wu, whose reign was between 140 BC and 86 BC. Even if Cai Lun was not the actual inventor of papermaking, many people believe that he deserves the recognition that he has been given in Chinese history for his role in the development of a material which revolutionized his country, and later, the world. So how was the early form of paper made? Well, from what we know, it seems that plants from the hemp family were soaked in water, washed, soaked again, and then beaten with a wooden mallet to make a pulp. The pulp would then be stored in a large vat. In order to convert the pulp to a sheet of paper, a mould was produced. The mould was probably made by first putting together a rectangular-shaped bamboo frame. A coarse, woven cloth was then stretched and fastened over the frame. The frame would then be dipped into the vat of pulp, removed, and hung up to dry. Now, the next real advancement came with the development of a smoother cloth for the mould covering. This made it possible to separate the newly formed sheet of paper from the mould and to then reuse the mould almost immediately. This new smoother cloth was made from a mix of very thin bamboo, silk, and animal hair. From then, around 600 AD, the process of making paper spread to countries in Asia. First, it seems, to Korea, where the production process was improved through the addition of seaweed and rice straw. A Korean monk by the name of Don Cho then took this papermaking to Japan, where he shared his knowledge with Japanese royalty. In Japan, this paper was first used, we are told, for government records only. But with the increasing popularity of Buddhism came an increasing demand for paper. Following this, the records then show the existence of paper in Tibet. The Tibetans began to replace their traditional writing materials, a type of palm leaf, with paper. The shape of the paper they produced, however, retained the long, narrow format of the original palm leaves. From here, it seems the process of papermaking spread far and wide across Persia, Central Asia, and then on to India. So, this brings us on to the arrival of the paper mill in North America. The first mill was established there in Pennsylvania in 1690 by William Rittenhouse. Now, Rittenhouse, like many of the early founders, was a European, from Holland in fact, and these people brought with them the papermaking model which was then present in Europe. This European way of production required paper mills to be near or be close to urban areas where there was a plentiful supply of rags, the main raw material of the day. Also, the mills needed to be close to a reliable water supply, since large quantities were used to drive the mills and wash the rags. Most of the machinery was also imported from Europe at that time, including the moulds, which required a certain skill, a skill that few workers in the British colonies possessed. Now, with the American War of Independence came an increased demand for more written communication and consequently for more paper. Locals gradually learned the skill of mould making, and soon there was no need for imports. After that war, paper mills started to spring up across the new nation, and the Americans began to experiment with different kinds of raw materials that were in more plentiful supply than rags. These experiments included the use of tree bark, sugarcane waste, straw, and corn stalks. Eventually, a development in England, that of the mechanical wood grinder, made wood pulp a viable option. In 1863, the first newspaper to be produced in America from paper made from ground wood pulp was published by the Boston Weekly Journal.